Welcome back, viewers, to the latest researches and news. Today we have three major updates. First of all, we will update you about the Shirena front claim war. The Ethiopian National Defense Force has released images and videos claiming they captured Tigray Defense Forces soldiers and seized heavy weapons. But this channel had previously shared the Tigray Defense Forces' own claims, first including the destruction of 3 tanks, 5 vehicles, and the capture of an Ethiopian National Defense Force tank. We put both sides' claims on the table and explain what each tells us. After that, about fighting near Tigray-Afar border in the Afar region. And in the end, about Fano and Ethiopian National Defense Force updates. Let us begin with a recap of everything this channel has reported on the Shireena front, because context is essential for evaluating what the Ethiopian National Defense Force is now claiming. 2 days ago, we shared updates from Tigray Defense Forces sources about what happened on August 1st on the Shirena front, the area along the Ethiopia-Sudan border in western Tigray. The Tigray Defense Forces made 3 significant claims at that time. First, that the Tigray Defense Forces conducted drone airstrikes against Ethiopian National Defense Force positions on the Shirena front, and that those strikes destroyed 3 Ethiopian National Defense Force main battle tanks and 5 military vehicles. Second, that the Tigray Defense Forces captured a significant number of Ethiopian National Defense Force soldiers in the fighting on the Shirena front. We were the first to share the video evidence of those captures footage showing soldiers in Ethiopian National Defense Force uniforms in the custody of Tigray Defense Forces fighters. Third, that Tigray Defense Forces units captured 1 Ethiopian National Defense Force military tank during the fighting. We shared the video of this capture as well footage showing Tigray Defense Forces soldiers celebrating alongside the captured tank. These were the Tigray Defense Forces claims. We reported them, shared the footage, and noted clearly what was confirmed and what was still being verified. Now, the Ethiopian National Defense Force side has responded. Not through an official military statement, the Ethiopian government has not issued a comprehensive, formal account of the Shirena engagement, but through images and video content that has been released through Ethiopian National Defense Force affiliated sources. What you are seeing on your screen is the material coming from Ethiopian National Defense Force sources. The images show large quantities of weapons, firearms, ammunition, and military equipment. The claim associated with these images is that this is all Tigray Defense Forces military equipment, weapons, and supplies captured by the Ethiopian National Defense Force from the Tigray Defense Forces on the Shirena front. There are also photographs of individuals. The Ethiopian National Defense Force sources are claiming that these individuals are Tigray Defense Forces soldiers captured during the Shirena fighting. Let us now analyze both sets of claims, the Tigray Defense Forces claims and the Ethiopian National Defense Forces claims, against each other and against the independently corroborated evidence. What can we say is independently supported? 2 things stand out. The situation at Gonda Hospital, where patients were moved out of their beds to make space for wounded Ethiopian National Defense Force soldiers arriving from the Shirena front, was confirmed by sources independent of either the Tigray Defense Forces or the Tigray People's Liberation Front. That hospital situation is consistent with the Tigray Defense Forces claims of significant Ethiopian National Defense Force casualties. The multiple independent video sources showing Ethiopian National Defense Force soldiers in Tigray Defense Forces custody footage that came from several different accounts independently. Not from a single Tigray Defense Forces release also corroborated the Tigray Defense Forces capture claims. What we cannot yet independently verify, the specific material in the Ethiopian National Defense Forces released images. We cannot confirm from those images alone that the weapons shown are Tigray Defense Forces equipment rather than equipment from other sources. We cannot confirm from the photographs that the individuals shown are Tigray Defense Forces fighters rather than others. These are claims from one side, presented visually without independent confirmation. The Tigray Defense Forces and the Tigray People's Liberation Front political administration have not issued any statement in response to the Ethiopian National Defense Forces specific claims from the Shirena front at the time of this report. That silence may reflect operational security considerations. The Tigray People's Liberation Front does not typically confirm losses or acknowledge specific details that could help the opposing side understand what was hit and where. We are working through ground sources and independent contacts to verify the Ethiopian National Defense Forces claims to the best degree possible. We will share confirmed information as it becomes available. In our previous video, we shared early reports about an incident in the Afar region, specifically in an area near a town called Tonsa, which sits close to the Afar Tigray border. Heavy weapons fire was heard in the area. That much is confirmed from multiple initial reports. The first version of events that circulated came from sources describing what they believed was a Tigray Defense Forces incursion. According to these initial reports, which are from unverified sources and which we clearly labeled as unverified at the time Tigray Defense Forces, units had crossed from the Tigray region into the Afar region through the Afar Tigray border and had launched an attack on Tigray Peace Force positions in that area. Let us explain who the Tigray Peace Force is for those who may be hearing this term for the first time. The Tigray Peace Force is an armed group made up of Tigrayan fighters who have chosen alignment with the Ethiopian federal government rather than with the Tigray People's Liberation Front political administration or the Tigray Defense Forces. It operates in areas where the Ethiopian government wants to demonstrate Tigrayan participation in its side of the conflict. Its existence is politically significant to the federal government because it complicates the narrative of the Tigray People's Liberation Front as the sole representative of Tigrayan people. So the initial report was Tigray Defense Forces crossed into Afar and attacked Tigray Peace Force positions. But then a second set of reports emerged, and these reports describe something very different. According to this second version, the shooting in Tonsa area was not a Tigray Defense Forces attack on Tigray Peace Force positions. It was a case of friendly fire, or more precisely, a confusion between Ethiopian National Defense Force and Tigray Peace Force units. The account in these reports suggests that Ethiopian National Defense Force personnel in the area encountered Tigray Peace Force soldiers and, in the confusion of the situation, mistook them for Tigray Defense Forces fighters who had crossed the Tigray-Afar border. The subsequent shooting was between Ethiopian National Defense Force and Tigray Peace Force, two forces that are nominally on the same side as a result of this misidentification. Let us explain why this second version is plausible enough to take seriously. In border areas where multiple armed forces operate in close proximity Ethiopian National Defense Force units, Tigray Peace Force militias, regional Afar forces, and the actual Tigray Defense Forces operating near the border, the risk of misidentification is real and documented. Different forces may wear similar looking clothing. Communication between units operating in the same area can be inadequate. In nighttime or high tension conditions, a group of soldiers from one affiliated force can be mistaken for the enemy by another group on the same side. If the Ethiopian National Defense Force fired on Tigray Peace Force soldiers, believing they were Tigray Defense Forces fighters who had crossed the border, that would be a deeply embarrassing incident for the federal government, which would have no interest in acknowledging or publicizing it. It would also explain the absence of a clear Ethiopian government account of what happened in Tonsa. At this point, both versions remain unverified. We have not independently confirmed which account is accurate. We are actively working to connect with ground sources and contacts who may be able to provide a clearer picture of what actually occurred in the Afar region near the Tigray border. As soon as we have authentic and verified information about whether this was a Tigray Defense Forces incursion, a friendly fire incident, or something else entirely, we will share it with you immediately. Now to confirmed battle reports from South and Central Gonda zones of the Amhara region, and to a report of regime retaliatory violence against civilians that must be addressed directly. In recent fighting, Amhara Fano National Movement forces conducted 3 separate engagements across the Gonda area, all producing significant casualties on the regime side. First battle, Simada Woreda, South Gonda Zone. Fano units operating under the Haile Meles Zeubante Division of the Amhara Fano National Movement's Bezabi Commandos formation repelled a multi-directional offensive launched by regime forces. The regime came from the direction of Fogeda, moving against the Jibge Medanealem, Seba Mikeo, and Kachena Kebeles simultaneously. A multi-directional offensive is designed to overwhelm defenders by attacking from more than one angle at the same time, making it difficult for a defending force to concentrate its strength in any one direction. The Haile Meleze Zeubante Division held its positions. The regime offensive was repelled. The engagement left 15 regime forces killed and 27 others wounded. Second battle, West Belesa Woreda, Central Gonda Zone. Fano units under the Wendwa Shalu Diseko and the Thaddeus Tantu Division engaged regime forces in the Zeleme and Finch Mikeo Kebeles. 11 regime personnel were killed in this engagement and more than 20 others were wounded. Third battle, Wegera Woreda. Central Gonda Zone, the Gonde Begesho Division engaged regime forces in the Simbeti and Gunti Kebeles. 11 more regime personnel were killed and more than 8 others sustained critical injuries. Now here is a detail from the Wegera engagement that deserves specific attention. Regime forces deployed Zu-23 anti-aircraft guns during the fighting, not to shoot down aircraft, not to counter Fano's drones, but to provide cover fire during the evacuation of their casualties as they retreated to Gedibke town. Let us explain what this reveals. The Zu-23 is an anti-aircraft weapon system designed for high rate of fire, suppressive shooting against aerial targets. When a military force uses an anti-aircraft gun for ground cover during a retreat, it means they needed the most powerful suppressive fire available to protect themselves while pulling back. They were under such pressure that using an anti-aircraft weapon in a ground suppression role was their best option. This is not standard military practice. It is an indicator of the difficulty the regime was experiencing in extricating its forces under Fano pressure. Across all 3 engagements, more than 37 regime forces were killed in total and more than 55 were wounded. And then what happened in West Belesa? after the fighting must be reported and named for what it is. Following the regime's battlefield losses in West Belesa Woreda, retaliatory violence against civilians was carried out. At least 6 civilian residents were executed by regime forces in West Belesa. Let us be clear about what happened. The regime lost a battle. Its forces suffered casualties and were forced to withdraw. And then its soldiers went into the community and executed at least 6 civilians. This is collective punishment. It is the practice of holding a civilian population responsible for the military losses of the regime. It is a war crime under international humanitarian law, the deliberate killing of civilians in retaliation for combat losses is prohibited under the Geneva Conventions, regardless of any claimed military justification. 6 people in West Belesa are dead tonight, not because they fought, not because they carried weapons, but because Fano fighters in their area defeated regime forces, and the regime's soldiers took out their losses on the community that lived nearby. This is what is happening in the Amhara region, while the Ethiopian government speaks of national dialogue and democratic governance in Addis Ababa. Let us bring everything together completely and clearly. On the Shireena front, the Tigray Defense Forces and the Ethiopian National Defense Force have both presented claims and evidence about what happened on August 1st. The Tigray Defense Forces claims of 3 tanks destroyed captured soldiers and a captured tank were reported first by this channel with footage. The Ethiopian National Defense Force has now released images and video of what it claims are Tigray Defense Forces weapons and captured Tigray Defense Forces fighters. The Tigray Defense Forces and the Tigray People's Liberation Front have not responded to the Ethiopian National Defense Forces claims. We are working to independently verify what the Ethiopian National Defense Force has released. In the Afar region near Tonsa, something happened involving heavy weapons fire near the Tigray-Afar border. The first reports described a Tigray Defense Forces incursion and attack on Tigray Peace Force positions. A second set of reports described a possible friendly fire incident between Ethiopian National Defense Force and Tigray Peace Force units. Neither version is independently confirmed. We are working to establish the accurate account and will share it as soon as it is verified. In Gonda, 37 regime forces were killed across 3 separate Fano engagements. The regime used anti-aircraft guns for ground cover during its retreat. And in West Belesa, 6 civilians were executed by regime forces in retaliation for battlefield losses they suffered. The people of Amhara did not start this war. The civilians of West Belesa did not pick up weapons, but 6 of them are dead tonight because the regime's soldiers took their losses out on the community that happened to be nearby. We will keep reporting everything as it develops accurately, completely, and without shortcuts. Like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update.